That's all that we heard. Lakers in 5, Lakers in 7. As they kept losing, it was Lakers in 7, and then they lost that series. So I hope to see Luka Doncic leave the Lakers as well. There are some more disgusting narratives being, pushed out there by none other than Rich Paul himself. Rich Paul is obviously he's the CEO of Klutch Sports. He just pushes the narratives like you wouldn't believe. You would think that you would think that LeBron James was the only athlete that Rich Paul was managing. You would think his full-time job is just to manage the narratives that support LeBron James being the GOAT. That's what you would think, right? Easily, no problem. But Rich Paul, he spent quite a bit of time with Chris Haynes, who I enjoy actually. And Chris Haynes, he pushed back on Rich Paul about certain things. Okay. He asked some tough questions, and maybe not tough questions, but he asked the questions that come to mind that anybody would ask. He didn't just glaze them up like Pat McAfee. So I am going to play some sound for you where Rich Paul is essentially blaming, okay? He's blaming the roster for the Lakers' exit. He also deflects to the teammates. So he's point blank asked about the roster because Chris Haynes basically pushes back and says it can't be the roster. You had enough big men to play. Why didn't you play them? Then Rich Paul also gets into deflection. Okay. So since they lost the series, it has to become he's deflecting to the teammates that couldn't help, that JJ couldn't rely on. So JJ had to make the decision to play Luka and LeBron all those minutes because he just couldn't rely on his bench. And then Rich Paul also has the nerve to not only deflect, throw the teammates under the bus and the role players under the bus, he also decides to deflect to other teams in the NBA. So yeah, the Lakers got knocked out in the first round. No big deal. We only had Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and no injuries on that team that, contributed to anything. But, I'm just going to bring up Miami, a completely depleted team with 0 superstars on it. I'm going to bring up the Miami Bucks where Damian Lillard was injured and went down in that series. So, these teams were underhanded. I'm going to compare the Lakers to that. So let me play this sound for you. It is quite ridiculous, but let's hear it, guys.
But the parity in the league throughout is just, as you can see in these playoffs, even that Knicks Pistons series, there was some lopsided ones, obviously the OKC series and the Cavs series, but I know the Orlando Boston series was 4-1, but Orlando, their piece
Yeah,
two
they played.
from really being competitive, and they played. They had guys compete. Very well coached team, and so it's no surprise to me. I really didn't, and I said this on the show as well. I just really didn't think that the roster for the Lakers was anywhere close to a championship type roster, and that's not making excuses. It's just a fact. And it's very hard to build a team for today and tomorrow. It's like anything else. You got to have the cupboard can't be bare. You got to have assets. You got to have cap flexibility. You got to have draft capital. You got to have guys that's developing into or playing at a level in which you're getting a production and they might be making X amount of dollars that's not as effective to your salary cap, but you're getting you may have a guy on the roster at 8 million, but you're getting $20 million production out of that player. And so you kind of need all those things. But when you lacked as much as they lacked, and then obviously you want to have to be dependent on the two biggest names. If our game has taught us anything, you cannot depend on names in this league. I remember in the 2004, the Lakers had all those names, and they ran up against the Pistons, who had a great balance. And we've seen what happened in that series. You just can't depend on names in this league only.
Yeah,
obviously you need them for sure, but you can't depend on names only. And so you go back to the drawing board, and hopefully you're able to replenish. How you get there, that's not my there's just above my pay grade from that perspective. But it's not easy. It's not easy for any team. Now, I look at teams across the league, and obviously, I have a profound respect for all people that we deal with on a daily basis to know how to understand, different from the average fan, but to understand how hard this stuff actually is. But you also got to help yourself over time. You have to help yourself over time, and smallest things can set you back so far.
And that team you were talking about, that Lakers team that had all those names for the youngsters that might be in here. He's talking about the Lakers at one point had Shaq, Kobe, Gary Payton, and Karl Malone on the team, and they fell short to that Detroit Pistons squad. You mentioned one thing about the Lakers. You said size. They didn't have the size.
So you heard him. You heard him over there talking about the roster, saying that they were never really built to win. That's what they said. They mentioned the fact that they didn't have the right roster. We knew this, but of course we need to hear these excuses after they lose. This wasn't the narrative right before the playoffs. The narrative was that they were going to beat the Wolves, that they were going to beat OKC. They were wishing for Oklahoma City Thunder in the first round. So I think it's really interesting that Rich Paul is coming out saying that they had roster issues. Where were the roster issues when the narrative was that they were going to the finals, that they were contenders, that they were going to win the title, that LeBron James was going to collect his 5th ring this year? But now that they're knocked out in the first round, what are they? They're undermanned. They don't have the right roster. Now listen to Rich Paul go on to blame the role players. He talks about Jackson Hayes. He deflects to other teams in the league. Like, what does the Miami Heat have to do with the cost of coffee in Jamaica when we're talking about this Lakers first round exit? Seriously.
You mentioned one thing about the Lakers. You said size. They didn't have the size as well with athleticism. People will argue that there was size, but the size wasn't being utilized, particularly when we talk about Jackson Hayes, and you saw Rudy Gobert having such a dominant game 5, 20-20 monster game, monster outing. What were your thoughts on just how? I'm not trying to get you to question anything, but just your thoughts on how the decision making and just the thought process going into that.
I'll never question it, but you also got to understand what leads to that decision making. The series didn't start out like that. That young man was playing. He was given the opportunity to start and play. And then throughout the course of a series, you make adjustments based upon a number of things. Unfortunately, in that perspective, they just couldn't depend on him. And I think that's a testament to the development in our league and having these young guys come in and understand the position that they're in. Unfortunately, you're in a do or die game. You get a technical foul in the first quarter of a do or die game as a role player. Those things are just unacceptable. You cannot do those things. And so there has to be accountability on everyone, right? And I think a lot of times young players come into our league and it's just, oh, I'm just playing the game of basketball. No, it's a very high level job that you have, and there's a dependence of you understanding the moment, and there's a dependence or expectation of you knowing what you can and cannot do. And I think that's a part of development. And it's not just being able to score buckets or getting in your bag and things like that. I think having the insight to understand my positioning on any team and what I'm able to do, that's a real thing. I think as children you learn, at least I did, there's just certain rooms that you're in and people talking. I wasn't allowed to talk. You wasn't allowed to butt in a conversation or have
different times. For sure.
Yeah, but those different times, again, they translate to,
no doubt.
And you see certain things, and look, and that's not necessarily a knock on Jackson. He's out there competing, and he's trying to bring the fire and things like that. But it's all the way up to a certain point, and then the coach make the decision. He can't do anything about that. I'm sure he would love to get another opportunity, but he handled it with professionalism, and said all the right things. And so you just try to learn from those experiences. I think he has a ton of talent, and obviously could have been used, or could have. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome of the series, but because it looked so lopsided. But again, like the coach said, like JJ said, also, you have to sacrifice something. So if we go big, if we play whichever person, Vando, whomever, then we give up something. We
Yeah, give and take.
Yeah, give or take. But you want to get stops, but then the way that everything is constructed, where do you go on the offensive end, right? And so look, you hate to be a backseat driver and things like those situations like those, but everyone has their opinions on it. But you just got to go back to the drawing board for anybody, right? I think the Heat's in the same position. I know that wasn't a sweet taste for them to go out like that, and you got teams like Giannis and the Bucks. Like he said, I'm a champion. I know what it takes. I've been here before, and somebody like that wants to continue to still be playing. They used to still be playing, and see Dame go down the way he did. It's just there's so many different dynamics throughout the course of series, throughout the course of games. But you gotta tip your hat, and for I'm a fan of the Timberwolves, man. I've always said at the beginning of the year, and although I think Finch said it in his press conference, although they had ups and downs this season, that's part of it. When you come off Western Conference Finals, you trade Cat, you're trying to gel. It's tough, but then you get to this point, the season starts over. You got 2 weeks to prepare.
Rich Paul is absolutely insufferable. I find Rich Paul to be a disgrace to the NBA. Klutch Sports strikes again. Okay, they're throwing teammates under the bus. They have created a complete smear campaign of Luka Doncic based off of things that are true, but now they're trying to impact his ability probably to move to another team. So, hey, you're either going to sit here and take this media lashing where we're going to blame you, we're going to dump on you and stay and deal with it, or you're going to run out of here because you messed up our game plan anyway, which is to bring Bryce and Bronny onto the team and, for LeBron James to create an entire clown show. They didn't ever intend for the Lakers to be a serious contender, right? Because then that would mean that LeBron James needs to work, towards the end of his career. It means that he needs to actually take these last couple seasons seriously. It's not all about babysitting Bronny James, who's wearing an NBA costume. It's, actually about winning and winning titles, right? Not letting the Boston Celtics continue to eclipse the Lakers franchise. But, I guess what we're playing for is daddy daycare, right? Bryce, Bronny will be there on the Lakers shortly, and we'll see, what's to come of Luka Doncic and if he's going to actually re-sign with the Lakers. But Rich Paul, JJ Redick, they're all in alignment. Jason Martin said it best that, it was Aaron Torres actually who said that it seems that they have just decided, hey, I'm not going to say anything bad about you. You don't say anything bad about me. And, we're in this together. So, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. That's JJ Redick, LeBron James, Rich Paul, Klutch Sports, Pat McAfee, Adam Silver. They're like a whole, I can't even call them a trinity, right? But JJ Redick, LeBron James, Rich Paul, they are the unholy trinity, right? They are this sort of, they're a huge media machine, they are a huge lying machine, and this is just what they do. So, I question, I'll bring the question back to you guys. Do we think that Luka Doncic is going to actually re-sign with the Lakers? Do we believe that? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. I do want to read the comments. It looks like we got a super chat. Salute to Mel from Man Down Sports. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Shout out to the homie Dom. Shout out to you, Mel. We have some really good content coming for you guys this week. Myself and Mel and Man Down Sports. It's going to be an exciting week. So look forward to this playoffs second round and what we have coming. I'm really excited for you guys to see it. But what do you guys think? The unclutched conglomerate media. Hilarious. I don't know if I would include Pat McAfee. He actually called out LeBum for flopping on that interview. Yeah, but he wasn't serious about it. Pat McAfee isn't a serious LeBron detractor. And he's not going to seriously challenge him. At the start of that interview, he actually called him the GOAT. LeBron James, GOAT James. That's what he said initially, opening up for him having this interview with him. So, yeah. Klutz Media. Everyone you named is the Justice League of excuses. LeBron James' teammates must secretly hate him. I don't know. Some of them speak very highly of him. Apparently, Rajon Rondo spoke highly of him. I thought that it was because he wanted a head coaching position. Who knows? But LeBron James and his fake GOAT discussion is something that continues to catch fire. It's not going anywhere. Him being compared to Michael Jordan is just not, that's never going to end on this earth, right? And what we are beginning to see and what's getting legs is the story and the idea that if Steph Curry gets a 5th ring, then he's going to eclipse LeBron James and he should actually be the person in this generation that's compared to Michael Jordan. And I've talked about it before. I talked about it last week. It was Paul Pierce that created this narrative. It's him that brought this idea to life. And it is breathing life through the media. Kendrick Perkins has now picked it up. He has seriously brought this out into the open as well. And, the question is, what does a 5th ring for Steph Curry really mean? What does that do for his legacy? Right? Should Steph Curry already be in the GOAT conversation?